Hey everybody, today I'm taking a look at Twisty Tracks, which is a 1 to 4 player lightweight tile placement game designed by Jeffrey D. Allers and published by Rio Grande Games. This one takes around 30 minutes to play on average. Now before I share my thoughts on Twisty Tracks, I want to give a shout out to the show sponsor KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in my show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. Okay, so Twisty Tracks is going to look like this once it is set up, where each player is going to have their own little setup here, where you have this frame where you'll be placing these little track tiles inside. Now these will be completely shuffled at random, and turn after turn you're going to be drawing each of these and placing them within the confines of that frame. There's also going to be a communal board here which shows all the different stations that you can visit, as you can see correlate to the frame of the board here, and the first players to get those trains to these specific stations will get the maximum amount of points, and the points will depreciate the slower other players are. You can see around the edge of the track here you've got the score track, and of course the player at the end of the game, which is when all of the trains amongst all the players have stopped moving, and the player with the most points will be the winner. So the game itself could not be more simple, where all you do on your turn, and you do this simultaneously with the other players, is that you draw the next available tile on your stack, you flip it over, and you have to place it somewhere within your frame, at least moving one train. So what I mean by that is that, say I placed this one here like so, you can see that this extends the track of the black train as well as the blue train. Now, as soon as you place the tile, you have to immediately move that train on that corresponding track. So this one will move from here to here. Now, each time you cross a border from tile to tile or from frame to frame, you will get a point. So that the blue train would get me 1 point because I moved from here onto this tile. Now, the black one here, we'll do the same way. You can see it goes under this tunnel. That'll get me 1 point for crossing that tile. It'll get me another point from going onto the frame here, and it'll get me another point for coming back on to this main tile. So again, each time it crosses one of these hard lines, basically, which is the break between two different tiles or the frame, you will get a point for doing that. And if you ever place a tile, let's say like this, and the train moves into a station, not only would you get the points along the way, so this again would get me 1 point for the red train, another point for the red train, because that's 2 borders I've crossed. I will also have to stop that train for the remainder of the game. This is no longer going to move, and then I'm going to take the most points available for that particular station. So this is the very basic station, the first one you come across. I would place my score marker like that and get the corresponding amount of points. Now, if other players were to get their trains to the same station at the same time, they would also get the main amount of points, or the highest available amount of points, but they would block off the corresponding amount of availability below it. So let's just say 2 players ended that turn, that would be the 10 points blocked and the 8 points blocked, meaning that only the 6 points would be available. And you can see here that depending on the player count, there are going to be more or fewer of these spaces available. So there's always fewer spaces in relation to the amount of players playing. So there's a kind of a sense of urgency to get these trains to the stations. And as you can see, the further you travel across the map, getting to these more difficult stations to get to, there's a lot more points available if you get there. So as the game progresses, your board might look something like this. And as you can probably imagine, as you are placing the final few tiles onto your map, the potential to have huge turns does start to amplify, because you can end up sending your train halfway across the map before it arrives at a station. And as mentioned earlier, as soon as all players' trains have stopped moving, you're going to add up all the points from your stations with all the points you've got during the game, and the player with the most points will be the winner. Okay, so let's share some thoughts on Twisty Tracks. And needless to say, this is very simple, silly fun. It's very chaotic in nature and reactionary. You're always kind of just tactically reacting to the next tile that you're drawing. But I do like that conflicting mechanism of the way you score points. Are you trying to prolong the life as long as you can of these trains, just to keep generating those points by going border to border, making them go on long journeys? And when you do pull off those huge long journeys at the end of the game and generating 10 or 12 points because you're moving them so far, that's a really fun thing to do. But that really does butt heads with the idea of trying to get them home and dry, get those points in the bank, and get a huge kind of point injection from getting them to the stations. But of course, the tension is there because there are fewer spots here available to you in relation to the number of players. So you always got to be kind of looking over your shoulder thinking, you know what, is now the time to flick that switch, get these points and secure this big burst rather than just keeping them on the board. And I've seen both different pathways work, so it's nice that they do kind of bounce off against each other. I do like how there are next to no rules to this game. Simply draw the next tile from the stack and extend a train track. So this is definitely a game you can teach to pretty much anybody, and I think this is a nice game to actually introduce to non-gamers and children alike, because you're going to be pretty hard pressed not to at least extract some fun from this game, because it's one of those games that put a smile on your face. It is so breezy and simple, and when you do pull off those big moves and rack up loads of points and send them on wild journeys, it's just fun. There's something fun about that. I think the game scales really well because, again, depending on the player count, there's going to be more or fewer of these spaces available. So, again, scales perfectly well. Most of the play is simultaneous anyway. So, apart from the scoring, you can do pretty much everything at the same time. So, there really isn't much downtime. You're always going to be engaged. It does only take around 20 to 30 minutes to play. So, it does not outstay its welcome either. And I think no matter who you're playing with you're not really going to get bored because it is so snappy. The production for this game is more than adequate. Yes, you do have to build up the little frame here yourself, but that doesn't bother me because it means you can fit it all in a smaller box. I think the tile size is just about right. It's not too tight within the frame, so you've got a little bit of leeway there. The wooden trains look cool. I suppose the only issue I have is that the scoreboard is a bit basic and the actual scoring tokens feel a bit cheap and don't quite fit on the scoreboard to a great degree, really. But that is a nitpick, and I think, yeah, the game production is absolutely fine. Okay, so let's share some quick final thoughts on Twisty Tracks. Now, as mentioned earlier, this game is silly, it's chaotic, it's it's very reactionary, but I do like it, and it has gone down well every time I've taught this to somebody new. There's just some kind of throwback, old school, almost toy feel to this one, and it has a certain purity to it with just enough touch of gaminess to keep hobby gamers engaged, because that tension of when is the time to call it quits and get my train home to get these additional points, that is quite tangible and is a big part of the game. And I think maybe without this, it wouldn't have really, it wouldn't have got me. But because of those two little conflicting things of, ticking the points along mixed with the instant points, that's just a nice little blend of gaminess there without even diverting from that simple turn structure of just placing a tile and moving the trains along. Is this going to have the legs to to keep this on my shelf long term? I'm not quite sure. Once the gimmick is done and everyone's seen it, am I going to go back to it? I'm unsold on that. But again, this is a perfect game to have if you do regularly teach games to non-gamers or children. I'm pretty sure this is going to be or going to go down extremely well, as it has done for me so far. But for a stable gaming group, are you going to always pull this one out? Probably not. But it is nice that it's quick, it's digestible, it's snappy, definitely doesn't outstay its welcome. Again, just enough touch of gaminess, and I like it. So kind of a soft recommendation from me. I'm not sure of the availability of it yet. I did have to pay a little bit of a premium for this copy, so I wouldn't pay over the odds for it because what you see is what you get with this one. But I do like it. So that is Twisty Tracks.